Okay, so thank you all for joining. My name is Katherine Londergan. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Zapata. And at Zapata, our purpose is to accelerate, oh, hold on, my virtual group fee is ready. Save photo. Okay, I'll do that later. And so our purpose at Zapata is to accelerate the quantum revolution. We do that through building software for mostly enterprise, but also academic users. And we're really trying to empower the entire community with the right tools and algorithms. I've been in quantum for a whopping 9 months and consulted with the team a little bit before joining Zapata full time. My past beyond Zapata, or before Zapata, excuse me, was mostly in design. And so I worked for a company called IDEO, which invented design thinking, some of you may be familiar with. And it's really an innovation firm. Before that, worked for different ad agencies and both on the brand side and digital marketing side. So it's sort of a mistake that I stumbled upon quantum. I never was seeking it out, but there's something super mysterious about this industry. And I have great respect for our founders. Denise was talking about Christopher, but we actually have 6 different founders in the science that they've pushed forward. So we're breaking new ground. It's an exciting marketing challenge. And even though I have a little bit of imposter syndrome in this role where everyone is like such a mega scientist, it's a great place to be. And I've brought 2 colleagues with me, AJ and Marta. AJ, do you want to first introduce yourself and why are you here? How did this happen?
Sure. So I'm a software engineer at Zapata, and I work on the team that works on Orchestra, which is a tool for running quantum workflows and managing output data. So my background is that I got a bachelor's degree in physics, and at some point learned about quantum computing and thought it was really interesting. And after graduating, made the decision to look for a job rather than going straight into grad school, which I do think ended up being the right decision because I found this opportunity at Zapata to work in the quantum computing industry and see what it's really like to work on quantum computing, and at the same time keep growing software engineering skills. So if I did go back to grad school someday, then I would do that with more confidence than I would have otherwise had if I had just gone straight after college.
Great, thanks. And Marta, please give us a little bit of your background and what brought you to the field and to Zapata.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Marta, and I work as a quantum software engineer at Zapata. And my day-to-day work right now is to implement scientific software for the platform that AJ mentioned, and use these tools for customer projects. My background is that I have a master's degree in physics, and my mainly focus during that course was quantum many-body physics with a computational approach. And as you can imagine, I've always been interested in quantum physics and fascinated by that. And I found a very interesting and challenging area of research. And the way I ended up being in the quantum computing field is that because I just followed some hints that came along my path. Since when I was doing my master thesis, my supervisor, mentioned Zapata, and then I had the opportunity to meet people from the company, and loved it, and had the opportunity to join. And so I decided to follow this fascination for a great vibe that I saw, and a great culture, but also this was unifying my passion. And so I think it's super interesting for me to work at something new with great coworkers, and also having the opportunity to stick around quantum physics. So I think it is a perfect fit, and that's why I'm here.
I think it's interesting, Marta, that you bring up culture and just the vibes of the culture. There are so many startups in quantum, and culture is so critical to get right from the beginning because we're all growing like mad. There's a lot of money coming in. There's a lot of people pouring into the field. And so one thing I think about constantly as a leader at Zapata is which pieces of this culture do we want to cement so that we can scale and stay true to those vibes that you mentioned. So the mindsets that our founders had and our first hires, and then also where do we want to evolve and morph? So that's something that's definitely on the top of our mind. And we are hiring and looking for people who fit that culture, but people who also will challenge it and help us grow in new ways. So it's an interesting thing to bring up. Okay, I want to also hit on how has quantum been different than other fields or jobs that you've considered? And maybe Marta, you could go first this time.
Sure. So I think the most exciting thing about quantum computing field is that it's like new. There's no such thing as like an established field. So like it's something really new, but also it builds upon existing tools, existing technology. So it's kind of, you have to really dig into what is there already and try to start from something that is already present to create new technology and then create something that breaks new ground. And so this is kind of like doing a PhD in a company, which I think it's like a great opportunity, and it's kind of unique to this field, at least from what I've experienced. And also another big challenge is that I find it hard to communicate what I do, such a way that is accurate and understandable, but without like scaring people away when I try to describe what's my job like. So I think this is actually an interesting challenge for people working in the field, because it forces you to go to the core and to the real heart of what you do every day. So you have to really understand and question what you're doing in order to be more, understandable for other people. So I think that's a great challenge. It's super interesting.
There's like a Goldilocks problem there where you could be too detailed, and go to the qubits, or you could be too abstract and not say much. I feel like it's like the cocktail party problem. How do you make it interesting enough so that people can have a conversation with you around it and still communicate the essence of what you do? It's a tough one. I've tried also with my 5-year-old. I haven't cracked it yet. AJ, what's different about working in quantum for you in this field?
Yeah, certainly one thing that stands out is how much uncertainty there is long-term. But at the same time, it still doesn't affect day-to-day too much, because we don't sit around thinking about the future. We decide what we're going to do and we work on that. And another thing that stands out to me is, with my background in physics, I wasn't in a software engineering role. It's unique to be able to work right alongside scientists. And so we have weekly science meetings where I attend presentations by them on papers, and being able to have a lot of people to talk to and learn from about science is really important to me.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like we're all in science class a couple times a week just to understand the concepts and what the breakthroughs are. Thank you for that. I love that, AJ, you are just building the future into existence through the software, because there is so much uncertainty, but we have to put, one foot in front of the other and make it so that we can all collectively in this broader community bring that quantum advantage to reality. When I think about how this is different from other fields and jobs, most of my experience is very design-led. And so at Zapata, we have tried to bring the customer into the process as much as possible, and empathy for them as we design the experience of our product. And design has always been something that I lead with, but right now it needs to be much more about the feasibility and what is even possible. And so it's been an interesting exercise for me, because design has taken a back seat until very recently, where we're more concerned with what is possible than how great the experience can be for the user. And now that's starting to flip. We have a foundation, and I'm able to kind of draw on my experience there more. I think also I've always been a prototyper and someone that experiments in my nature. And I would say that is at the essence of everything we do. Our field is experimental by definition. And so that stretches into the business aspects. And in the science, it's definitely true, but also in the business aspects where everything is an experiment, everything is iteration and learning. When we put something out there for our customers, what's their response, and how do we iterate the product based on that, for example? Okay, I want to shift to a moment in time. I mean, I think this is all, especially in the US, where we are still working on getting our act together with regard to the pandemic. We've been really remote, and it's been an interesting time to be a woman or any human being in quantum. And so I'd love to ask AJ and Marta, What have you learned about yourself in 2020 with this backdrop? And it's not just a pandemic. There are important race questions coming up. There are important social questions coming up. How does that feel, and what have you learned about yourself? AJ, you want to go first?
I can go first, yeah. So one thing that I've learned is that paired programming, which is a process that we use for working together. So on my team, we work in pairs where we're both looking at the same machine, working together on anything most of the time. I already knew it was a pretty good working style for me before the pandemic, because I think it's really good for transferring knowledge and not getting stuck in a rut and continuing to grow. But then when the pandemic started, I've also found that it's really helpful for feeling connected with coworkers while working, because work does take up a large part of your life. So if you're spending a lot of the time working with people, but still in a productive way and not feeling totally bogged down with meetings, then it can be really helpful.
Marta, how about you?
Yeah, so I've been working for Zapata remotely from Italy for almost 10 months. So also, like, I was remote, but I also had a time difference with my coworkers. So what ended up happening for me is that I had like half of my day in which I had to work by myself, basically. And then the risk for me was to, continue that trend and like just be isolated without reaching out to people. And instead, what I learned is that it's really valuable for both like building the community, but also building myself as part of the community and building like new ideas. It's really important in order to do this to like reach out to people and to coworkers and just like establish connections. So I learned to like deliberately reserve and save some time for these kind of meetings with colleagues. And I think it's very valuable.
Community is so important now more than ever. So thanks to Denise and Andre and everyone gathered here. I think loneliness is very real, and it doesn't always show up in plain sight. Sometimes we're on Zoom all day, but we can still feel that. And so reaching out to people, asking for help, building that community, finding a way to talk about something other than, whatever task we're working on together in Asana can be really helpful. I think one thing I learned during the pandemic is that I need to build new muscle around switching between being a mother and being a CMO or being a colleague. And those are very different modes for me. And so based on where my colleagues are and my 3 and 5-year-old children, I need to switch back and forth to work multiple times a day. And I've learned that I need to do that with a very physical intent. So there are things like nutrition that are really coming into play where I didn't used to pay much attention to it, or sleep, or posture, or breathing. And I think the biggest thing is that I'm learning my physiology can drive my mental state. Whereas before the pandemic, I would do the other way around. I would say, okay, get your head ready for this meeting. Now I try to get my body ready to work with my children, or get my body ready for a marathon executive leadership meeting for 4 hours on Zoom. So they're very different states. And I've learned that even the simplest thing, like getting down on my children's level to look in their eyes, just puts me in a different headspace with them.
So we need to wrap up. So thank you, Katherine. Thank you, I think, Marta and AJ coming to us from Italy and I guess the Boston area. AJ, where are you?
Boston.
Boston. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us.